Good morning, everybody, and welcome. This shiur is taking place right now on Zoom and is also being broadcast live on Facebook with a 20-second delay. I'm also recording the shiur for people who might want to participate by just listening or watching later. Anyone who's on the line, I've taken the liberty of muting you for now, but by all means, write me in a question while we're going, or I think you might have a way there that says like raise your hand, and you'll be able to unmute yourself to be able to ask said question. I'm hopeful that this is not going to be a monologue, but a dialogue of some sort. Let's try it out. So here we go. The Hagadah each year that we open speaks to us based on our personal circumstance and what we're up to in life. That's not surprising. The text of it, obviously, is, at this point, pretty fixed. But at the same time, there's a lot to be said for our ability to read our situation into it. I'm going to start, though, by cautioning any and all who will be, God willing, organizing Seder this year to be careful, not to allow your whole Seder, that all of Pesach is just a discussion about the virus and about problems and issues. Davka, the night of the Seder, is a night of great simcha. It is matchil begenut, but it is mesayim b'shvach. It does start describing the denigration, but it is meant to end with a sense of praise and thanksgiving to Hashem for the bracha of being able to have a Seder. Granted, the Sederim this year for all of us will be different than it has been in previous years. For some of us, probably in our living lifetime, we don't have any recollection of a Seder quite like this. And at the same time, the idea that we're back again should be a point of celebration, to be able to say these words and to know that, as we had said so many years previously, for so many of us who lived in what we felt like really good times and times that were always on the upswing, and for so many of us who lived through and are perhaps living through tough times, irrespective of this issue with the virus, but just to have that sense of perspective. Some of the things on the Seder plate are meant to remind us of this. And I want to turn your attention, before we even begin, to the nonverbal signals that are on the Seder plate. I'm not giving any chidushim, you know this already, but the Seder plate includes not only elements that are present, but also elements that are absent. Chief among them, of course, is the shank bone, the zroa, that this year more than others perhaps should be pointed to, because of the reality that we are without a Beit HaMikdash, therefore without a Korban Pesach, and we're serving a meal in which the main food of the meal is not going to be on the table. Instead, we have just a Zecher LeKorban Pesach. Also on the plate, right next to it, is the Beitza. The Beitza is an egg. It's meant to be roasted as an egg. A little more on that tonight, and how to run your own Seder. For those who are new at this and want to know how to prepare same, join us tonight, 8 p.m., and that information went out. I'm sure I'll send it out again at some point today, just as a reminder. But that Beitza is meant to be a stand-in, first of all, for the Korban Chagiga. It's in suspension right now, but we're in the midst of, many of us are studying Masachet Chagiga. It's about the celebrational offerings that were brought whenever someone would make the trek up to Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, for any of the three holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And so Jewish people would stream to Yerushalayim, not live stream, but actually stream. They would be matayr themselves, purify themselves on the way up to Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, carrying, if not with their peklach that they're carrying and their own sheep in tow. When they got to Yerushalayim, they would buy that, as well as for the Korban Pesach, as well as the Korban that would be the offerings of Korban Chagiga, as Shalmei Chagiga. There's also a Korban Re'iyah, the Korban Olat Re'iyah, that is offered just for arriving and seeing and being seen by Hashem in Yerushalayim, in the Makom HaMikdash. On our Seder plate, because it was meant to be eaten also at the Seder, is the Shalmei Chagiga, the representation of the Korban Chagiga, part of which was offered on the Mizbeach, and part of which was consumed by people at their festive Yom Tov meal. There was a Chagiga for Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. This one, in this case, was obviously the meal itself, culminating in the consumption of the Korban Pesach. And now it's an egg. An egg is oftentimes associated with the food that is given to mourners. And it's not accidental that we didn't take another piece of meat and put it in the spot, call it the chagiga. We call it instead the beitza. A few things to consider here. Number one, that it is a recollection of something that also we're missing this year. We've missed it in previous years, but for so many of us this year, perhaps we feel the lacuna even more. It's more pronounced, it's more intense. The egg is served to mourners because mourners have trouble speaking, and because it is a closed food, like lentils are a closed food. And that's why, I've mentioned many times, the Sudat Havra, the food that is given to mourners, the first food is usually after they come back, God forbid, from a burial, lo aleinu, is they eat a closed roll of bread, some kind of a loaf, a little thing that's closed. They don't eat the whole thing, they eat a piece, and they eat part of a beitza, of an egg. The subtle piece here is that we're hoping that in the moment then people feel silenced, they'll be able to, even though we recognize that they have silence now, that they can bring speech to their experience. In that case, it's a case of mourning. But I think there's a message here too for us. So much of the Leil HaSeder is in fact about speaking. The Rambam writes that if a person was by themselves at the Seder, in order to fulfill the mitzvah, it's not enough to think about it. The person have to tell the story. They would tell the story to themselves. Actually uses the expression, the person, if they have no one to ask the questions to, the manishtana, they ask them to themselves, and they give themselves the answer. The dialogue, in other words, can happen within the self, but not just within the self, with the self. Actually, you want to call it self-talk, that's only if you're talking to yourself. But Hashem is coming to everybody's Seder. That's part of our avoda as well. We give the egg to remind us, I think, that we start in silence, and we're bringing speech to that silence. Number two, the egg is meant to represent for mourners, and I think it's true here this year, perhaps more than others. Galgal chozer ba'ulam. The wheel turns and within the world, and the one who now feels low tomorrow, maybe even later today, can feel that they're being raised high again. And we're gathering now virtually for Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Let me wish everyone a Chodesh Tov. And the idea that this is a great day for Klal Yisrael historically, and hopefully it'll be an auspicious day for us as well. So those are two silent symbols that are on the Seder plate that essentially have no role except for their visual elements. The other parts that are on the Seder plate are going to be consumed or dipped in some way, and these are not. By the by, my family minhag is actually that when Shulchan Orech starts, we actually do eat the beitza in salt water, and that's just a family minhag. I don't know if that's your family minhag, but if it's not, then you don't need to start that minhag per se. But that's not neither a mitzvah, nor is it something that one should think of as one of the elements that's really meant to be consumed. It's really sitting on the table as such to give us those cues. So that's the Seder plate itself, and that's before we get to the Daled Kosot, and much to say about the Daled Kosot and what they represent. Most overtly, everybody pretty much knows that they are the frame for the Seder, and they are a representation of, among other things, the Daled Lashonot Geul, the four expressions of redemption. What does it mean for a person who feels confined or feels that they are alone to be able to raise a cup and to make a declaration that there is an expression of redemption in the world? I think this is a great and powerful and important symbol for us. Halachically, it's called Pirsume Nisa. One is publicizing the miracle. Publicizing the miracle means making a declaration that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has brought us to this time again in order to recall the inexorable march, I would say, of history, Jewish history, world history. Among the Hasidim, they point out that wine is so often the instrument of forgetfulness. But for us as Klal Yisrael, it's really meant to represent a way that we hold up the object or the elixir that's so often associated with forgetting, and we will davka say we remember. We remember our past, and we also remember that we are promised a glorious future. We appreciate that the road there is a process, and it has many challenges within it, but we still have a certain quiet confidence, a sense of emunah pshuta, that we raise these cups, and we make that the frame for our evening together as Klal Yisrael, wherever we may be, even if we're not physically together. Let's open together now. We don't have time to do every single element of the Seder. What I'd like to focus on, I usually open with some aspect of the setting the table, if you will, and then I like to go right into the Magid section. So you have Kadesh and Urchatz and Karpas, Yachatz. Those are 4 steps at the beginning. And then we go to Magid, which is the text of the Hagadah itself. If you have a Hagadah at home, I hope you brought it. If not, you can right now go on Google quickly and look up Hagadah Shel Pesach, and hopefully you can find one there. I believe there is a one on Sefaria.org. If anyone on the line now has a good link and you want to send it to me via chat, or send it to everyone actually right now in the group. We can participate together and share our foray into the Haggadah. So, Magid, the telling of the story. The first paragraph that we see each year is the Halach Ma'anya. The Ritva points out this is actually not part of the Haggadah. It's extraneous to the Haggadah. It's not actually really telling the story. It's a little preamble. The Maseh Hashem, also one of the earlier Haggadahs among the Rishonim, points out that it is in Aramaic to highlight this point of the Ritva. That's why it's not in Hebrew. In Aramaic, because the exile is upon us when we read the Haggadah, so many of us. So before we even get to tell the story, we were slaves to Paro in Egypt. The preamble, the quote-unquote new preamble, it's in Aramaic. Aramaic, of course, is the lingua franca of the Jewish people in exile, the first one. We've had many since. Most prominently, of course, when I say many, I mean the languages of non-Jewish people. Aramaic is not officially a Jewish language, obviously. But we do also have, of course, Ladino and Yiddish, and then all the other languages that Jews have spoken over the years. We open, therefore, says the Maseh Hashem, Dafka with the language of exile to signify already in our first words the vehicle that we're using to make our expression of Magid happen is that we're without the Korban Pesach, that we're without Yerushalayim Habenuya, in the sense of the Beit HaMikdash being built. So now everything that we're having now when we eat this meal is in a certain sense something related to a Sudat Oni, something of impoverishment in and of itself, that we are in exile. And maybe more so than other years, that rings true for so many of us and will ring true for us when we're saying the Haggadah. But to look at the words and to appreciate that, for me at least, even just looking at them when I was preparing the shir and thinking a little bit about how wistful it feels to look at the words where we're saying anyone who's hungry, let them come and eat. And anyone who needs to should come share the experience with us in a year where Davka, the Makkah that has fallen upon all of humanity, and especially Klal Yisrael that is so connected to itself, the idea that we're not really able necessarily to have guests this year for safety reasons. Rav Soloveitchik in his Haggadah, the Siach Hagrid Haggadah, points out there's a Gemara Masechet Tanit, Rav Huna b'chol yom ki have a karich rifta haya omer kol man ditzrich leiti v'leichu. Rav Huna, every day when he would break bread in his house, he would say out loud, anyone who needs, let them come and eat. Freedom is the ability to invite guests. It's the ability to bring people into one's home. And I was thinking the other day that it's remarkable to me. I would never have imagined, no one could imagine, would be up to a point where Hachnasat Orchim is a mitzvah that right now is very challenging to fulfill for halachic reasons. Having to lishmartim odan afshotechem. But that's a reality. In the Kol Eliyahu, the Vilna Gaon in the Sefer the Kol Yo says that the Ma'ot Chitim is a fulfillment of the statement in the Torah in Parshat Bo, Matzot Yachel Et Shivat Hayamim, to eat the matzah for 7 days. It's not that you shall eat the matzah, but matzah shall be eaten for 7 days. Who shall eat the matzah? The answer is anyone else who you help to eat the matzah. And that's why it's what's called binyan nif'al. Matzot ye'achel. Not tochlu, but ye'achel. Shall be eaten for the 7 days. Cause others to be able to eat. Let me pause here and see if there are questions or comments. I've been doing a lot of talking, uncharacteristic for our Thursday morning class in general.
One question, Rabbi, the Chagiga, that was typically meat, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, the whole idea behind Afikomen is you barely have room for that little piece of lamb.
That's correct.
It wasn't an egg.
Al Hasova. So why did it get transferred to an egg? That's exactly my point. That's why we're using an egg. Is Davka, we already have a piece of meat on the table to represent the Zeroa, but why do we switch over Davka to a Beitza? So the idea of switching to the Beitza is, as a Zeichel Chagiga, I think it's the aspect of trying to recall this Galgal Choser Ba'olam. It's the idea of remembering that we're silent because, first of all, dessert's not coming. Dessert, which is the main mitzvah, which is the Afikomen, it ain't coming. It's absent. Yeah. And I went to a banquet and there's no Korban Chagiga. So I'm going to have some beautiful food, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that was from the Mizbeach. It's not an achila lifnei Hashem in the sense of a korban that means I ate it before Hashem. The samach lifnei Hashem lekechem. Half of the korban is on the mizbeach, and part of it I'm actually eating. I'm missing something.
Yeah.
I was going to say later in the shir to come back to it again, but since you mentioned it now, Ronnie, let me say it now because I think it's an important point. An egg reminds us about the potential for new life. It reminds us that things are moving in a certain process. There's a gestational period. There's a period where it seems someone would tell you inside this egg is going to be the new life of the new thing of the. Say, I don't understand. That's Hashem's running the world, right? Most creatures when they're born are dafka. You know, they had some kind of gestational period, and it's true for history as well. I was going to say it's the end about Biat Gold Tzedek with Mashiach Tzidkenu's arrival, but again, since you brought it up, you know. Yeah. It would have been so simple. Say, take another piece of meat. Take the same piece of meat, the zroa, cut it in half. You know, poultry scissors. Put it on two sides. Here's your zroa. Here's your. Oh, they're both meat. Why did I change it to an egg? What does the egg have to do with anything? So I tried to show Sudat Havra, bringing speech, Gal Chalzer Ba'olam. And the third element is that there's a process of Jewish history. We're looking at it as an egg because the egg is filled with potential for a new life. Like that. So those are some of the elements.
Yes,
okay, let's learn a little bit more in Halach Ma'anya. Let's just go back to a few more things. Just muting you again, Ron. There's no background noise, but anyone needs to unmute themselves to speak. By all means. Sally forth. When you look at the end of this statement, we mentioned Hashtahach Shana Baba Arad Yisrael. Now we're here. Next year we'll be in Eretz Yisrael. I read these words. I will grant you as somewhat of a rebuke in our time. We should all think a little bit. Each person. I normally say it just on 2 days, on Tisha B'av and on Yom HaAtzmaut. But I think this year particularly, we should think what it means that we're in Chutz La'aretz. We're not in Eretz Yisrael. And we should think a little bit about Eretz Yisrael. Right now we're here, and we say next year could be in Eretz Yisrael. For so many generations, a dream, a fantasy. It's not so hard. Now it happens to be challenging because the Bayit of Klal Yisrael had to close its doors to be able to safeguard its people, its citizenry. But we should be thinking a little bit about this. There is an idea, says the Hagadah of the Moadim Uzmanim of Rav Sternbach, that the Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael here being referenced, L'Shana Haba Ba'aretz Yisrael, is actually a call to make Aliyah during the time of Shibud Malchiot. Shibud Malchiot means under the subjugation of the nations of the world. Only after, and that's why it says L'Shana Hashtahach L'Shana Haba Ba'aretz Yisrael, Hashta Avdei, now we are slaves. L'Shana Haba B'nei Chorim. The Rambam writes that based on the memra, the statement of Shmuel and the Gemara and Sanhedrin, the Rambam actually paskins. He thinks that there's no difference based on Shmuel, again in the Gemara, between Yemot HaMashiach and before Yemot HaMashiach. What's the difference? In Yemot HaMashiach, the Ein Bein Yemot HaMashiach to what comes before, Ela Shibud Malchiot Bilvad. Only one thing, the subjugation of nations of the world. Israel's ability as a nation state to do what it wants to do without care or concern for what the implications would be. That freedom, that's what Mashiach Tzidkenu will be bringing. Says the Moadim Uzmanim, you can have a situation where you go to Eretz Yisrael, there's still Shibud Malchiot, and it's there's still something to it, even if we're not yet B'nai Chorim as such. Anyone want to say anything about Halach Ma'anya? Comments, questions? We'll move to the next thing. I do remind you in advance, we're being broadcast, I think, on Facebook Live. We're definitely being broadcast on Zoom here, and it's recording. So if you want to write it in, if you prefer more, that's good. That's good too. I'll just check my phone in case someone wrote in like that, but perhaps not. And okay, well, maybe not. Okay, moving right along then. So, Manishtana. So I mentioned probably almost every year that according to the Aruch HaShulchan, the words Manishtana are not words in which we are speaking specifically about asking questions, as much as expressing some kind of wonderment. We're just awestruck. It's not, how is this night different from every other night? Question mark. It's, wow, how different is this night than other nights? What's the difference between the two? In the first case, it's an open-ended question. It's a person who just doesn't know. They don't even really have a question, except they know something's different. So how is it different? Talk to me about what the contrast might be. The Aruch HaShulchan said, no, just look at what Manishtana is. Manishtana is actually already a study in contrast by the person asking the questions. So if you ask, wow, how different is this night than other nights? Exclamation point. And we say, because on all other nights we have this. On this night we have something different. Every other night it's chametz and matzah. Tonight it's just matzah. All the other nights it's all the vegetables. Tonight it's just maror, etc., etc. So it's a different approach in terms of trying to understand what the question is. And here we come to the root of the types of questions that people ask altogether. So often questions are only questions when we have some kind of basis for understanding, and then our curiosity has been piqued. If we don't have that, then we shrug our shoulders. It's not something we can even relate to. We need to know something about the fact that Saturn has rings before we can ask, well, what's the composition of those rings? As opposed to, do you know that the composition of the rings of Saturn is as follows? You read off an ingredient list. I'm not, so what? Once you pique someone's curiosity, then they can ask questions. And that idea of the study in contrast is also already being put on display by the elements that are actually physically on the table. This section of the Hagadah already, and of course much of Magid, is drawn out of the world of Chazal. It's a composite of different sections of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And you can just imagine a time, before the Mishnayot were written by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. This is actually a Mishnah based on a Mishnah, Masechet Pesachim. It's not verbatim. There's a few changes, but it's pretty close. The idea that this Mishnah, Manishtana Laila Hazeh, before we got to that, it was really just ask some questions, figure out ways to get people to ask questions. In fact, if one is blessed to have another person at their Seder, then they have to try to get that person to ask some kind of question. Oftentimes there's an element of either picking up the Seder plate and removing it from the table, putting it on the side of the table, doing something strange. It should be something dignified that's strange, not something that everyone is wondering what happened to the dignity of the Seder. But at the same time, there should be something that's done that causes a peak of curiosity that comes about. And then this text follows on the heels, hopefully, of someone who asked a particular question. The Beit HaLevi That's Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, meaning the great grandfather of the Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik that we always speak about from the 20th century. But the Beis Halevi says that these, the way things are arranged in Manishtana now, the first two questions refer to mitzvot deoraita, mitzvot that are related to that which is anchored in psukim in the Torah. The Torah tells us to eat matzah and stay away from chametz. The Torah tells us specifically to eat maror. The latter two are about mitzvot d'Rabbanan. The Chachamim indicate that one should do dipping on the night of the Seder, here twice over. Those two times are specifically the dipping of the karpas and the dipping that's going on later of the maror and shaking it off. However, if you look at the Rambam in the 8th chapter of Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah, the Rambam actually thinks that almost everything, including the matzah itself, should be dipped in the charoset, which is just interesting about thinking about what happened with the dipping. That somehow there's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan that modifies the mitzvot deoraita, that every single thing is going to be dipped in it, and there's the symbolism there as well. We'll come back to shortly. But the leaning also, leaning is an expression of freedom, and leaning is an expression of freedom from a particular time in history. Most of us don't probably at our dining room table lie down, or recline to our left side. You're supposed to recline to the left, by the way, not to the right, and not on your back. It's supposed to be to the left side specifically. So who usually lean to their side when they ate? So this is also from the days of Chazal. They have many descriptions that people would be mesav. This was the way of noble people when they were free and wanted to show their aristocracy. They would not eat in a slovenly manner, shoveling the food in and bending over the table. They would recline, take the food in a leisurely manner. And that's for us to do as well on the Leil HaSeder for various parts of the Seder itself. The question came up, which is a great question. How are the four questions related to the four sons? Does each question come from a different son? Excellent question. And there are a number of Mefarshim who link the two up. In order to answer this, though, I have to get to the four sons. Let's see if we get that far to try to address the question. The number 4 is obviously very significant at the Seder. 4 cups, 4 questions, the 4 sons. Right? That's right there. There's 4 going on. And as against this number of the 4 Lishonot of Geula, for each of them, there is actually a phantom fifth, a fifth that is in the not yet, in the once was and is not yet again. So, in terms of the 4 questions, if you look up the 4 questions in the Mishnah itself, Masechet Psachim, you'll note that there's actually one of the questions about eating Korban Pesach. We're not eating Korban Pesach. So that question was removed, but that's a 5th question. If you look at the 4 cups, as everybody knows, they're the 5th cup on the table. And that 5th cup, according to almost all of the mainstream opinions that I'm aware of, for today, I'm saying, we don't drink the 5th cup. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Kasher, in his brilliant and beautiful Hagadah Shlema, the Seder Hagadah Shal Pesach, which is an incredible, incredible work, has an entire section in the back, which is called just simply Kos Chamishi. It's pages and pages of an essay, excursus, into trying to explain and understand that there actually were, among the various Rishonim who felt you should drink the 5th cup, and he wanted to make a case that perhaps one should drink the 5th cup even today. I'm not poskening that one should. I think one dafka should not. We're certainly living in an unredeemed world. But yesh amilisma, there is such an idea. But what do? We put on the table, kos shel yo, it's coming. And I skipped, of course, the Daled Banim, the 4 sons. So there are many who have pointed out that really there should be 5 sons. And the 5th son is variously understood. Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zchuti Yagen Aleinu, explained it this way. Rav Soloveitchik explained it this way. Zchuti Yagen Aleinu. Also, same thing. The 5th child is a child who is so lost from Judaism that they're not at the table now. But the same way that I have the 4 questions, which someday will be 5 again, the same way that I have 4 cups now and a 5th cup that is palpably manifest. It's sitting in front of me at the table. It's the kos shel yo, but it's not the time to drink it yet, but we'll get there. The same is also true of the idea of that fifth child, who may be a member of our own family or our own community, who right now is away. And part of our emunah, and part of our tefillah, even on nights like the Seder, is not to lose hope. To realize that the geula on a national, universal, but even on a very personal, individual level, it takes time. And it's very, very hard to wait. Very hard. We're only coming in, we read the Hagadah, really at the end of the story, and we're going back to reflect in the beginning of the story. Where have you been for the last 210 years? None of us can stretch that far back in our memory. But that's how long Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim, under terrible conditions most of the time. Some more intense than others, but a prolonged period stretching over 2 centuries. And by the by, even though the number 210 is an even number, and that's very nice, and it's not 400, and it was quicker than they thought, it also wasn't a round number, I'd like to point out. Meaning, do you remember what happened, those of us who recall what it was like that Friday night when 1999 was turning into 2000? First of all, the pachad, that Y2K was going to undo the whole world. Secondly, this is a momentous occasion. Until you stopped and you realized the only reason we're moving from 1999 to 2000 is because we're stuck in a calendar that has to do with another religion that we all date all of our documents by in the secular world. It has nothing to do with Klal Yisrael. Nothing. Except that we were stuck. But there was a feeling of momentum, like this is the millennium, it's that round number, the year 2000. And we even had that nickname, Y2K. Hashem doesn't have to work on our calendar. Have we been redeemed after 200 years? Oh, half off, great. No, it was 210. It was an uneven number. Is 5780 the number? I think it could be, very well could be. And we're not in a position, not me, not you,